Sphinx Temple directly in front of the Sphinx, so-called, and the Valley Temple to the left as we view it. And you can see that the Sphinx is a rock-hewn structure cut out of the bedrock with a trench around it. The notion that the Sphinx bears the marks of precipitation-induced weathering is an evolution of an idea that the late great John Anthony West had. It was he who brought Robert Schoch to the Giza Plateau. Robert took a look at the erosion around the Sphinx and eventually came to the conclusion that the best explanation for it was that this Sphinx enclosure had been subjected to at least 1,000 years of extremely heavy rainfall. And Robert Schoch right now puts that back to around the 10,000 BC date 12. It's often said that the Sphinx was the work of the pharaoh Khafre, and that these two temples were the work of the pharaoh Khafre, particularly the Valley Temple that we see on the right there. There's no inscriptions in the Sphinx Temple, but when we come to the Valley Temple, what we're looking at is a limestone core, and those limestone blocks were actually taken out of the Sphinx trench, which was then faced in a later time with granite. Now, that's the interior of the temple. You can see that there's definitely two phases of construction there. There's the granite, no dispute that that's Old Kingdom Egypt. And then there's the limestone massive megalithic walls behind it, which are heavily eroded, as you can see even from here. And I.E.S. Edwards, who was one of the leading Egyptologists of his time, wrote this. Around each doorway was carved a band of hieroglyphic inscription giving the name and titles of the king, but only the last words, beloved of the goddess Bastet and beloved of the goddess Hathor, are preserved. No other inscriptions occur anywhere else in the building. In other words, there's nothing in that temple that directly connects it to the pharaoh Khafre. But what's interesting is the way that granite facing, which certainly was done in the Old Kingdom, has actually been, the interior of the granite has actually been cut to match the heavily weathered limestone that it's covering. It's been cut to shape that. They're honoring and respecting that ancient structure. And so in my opinion, the geological evidence on the antiquity of the Sphinx is strong. There's no doubt that the ancient Egyptians were there, that they did work on the Sphinx. The head of the Sphinx was recarved into a human head. I and my colleagues believe it was originally the head of a lion, that the Sphinx was an entire lion.
But the evidence that it's been carved is that it has far less erosion than the rest of the body, correct?
And also the head is way out of proportion to the rest of the body. That's an issue, because one thing the ancient Egyptians were pretty good at when they put their minds to it was proportion.
Yeah.
And the disproportionate size of the head of the Sphinx in relation to the whole body of the Sphinx.
I mean, if you look at other ancient Egyptian sphinxes, they also have small heads. If you put my head on a lion, it would look small. And they all look relatively small.
Indeed, it would look small. That's the point. It was a lion before, and it was heavily eroded, and it was then cut down into a human head.
But